Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast, hosted by Christen Clark. This is a show for kids and families. You are going to meet new people and have fun while you listen. Let's do it!
Hey y'all, welcome to the Collide Kids podcast. I am so glad that you're listening today, and I feel like we are becoming friends. Hey, if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. Like they said at the beginning, the Collide Kids podcast is a show for kids and families. And this is where we learn together how life and faith collide. Before I tell you about my next guest, I want to remind you about the kids only segment at the end. I'm really looking forward to hearing from some of my friends today. You know, it's a lot of fun being on a podcast, and I don't want to have all the fun. I would love to share that with you. So I'd love for you to be on the podcast. I'll give you some more information about how you can do that towards the end of the show. In case you haven't noticed, each episode title starts with how to. And today's episode is how to fly an airplane. That's right. And that's because my special guest today is Captain Jason Rackley. Captain Rackley is an airline pilot, and he has a great story about how he decided to become a pilot and what it takes to do this kind of job. So, tray tables up, make sure your seat is in the upright position, and let's get ready to take off as we fly through this conversation with Captain Jason Rackley. Well, welcome to the show, Jason. I'm so glad you're joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me, Christen.
Yeah, this is awesome. I'm so excited I get to introduce everyone to you. You're a friend of mine, and I think you have a pretty cool job. You're a pilot, like you fly real live airplanes, right?
As opposed to the fake ones, yes.
Well, not like
yeah,
the little like
ones.
tiny toy model kind or the drones. Like
Yes.
you like get in it and you fly people. Tell us who you are and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, my name is Jason. I am a pilot for JetBlue Airways, and I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts. And I fly an Embraer 190 aircraft. One cool thing about my job is I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, but I actually work in Boston. And so each week, whenever I go to work, I have to actually get on an airplane to commute to work, which is kind of a fun job, but also adds to the stresses of trying to beat the Monday morning rush hour traffic.
Yeah, you have a couple of traffic options to deal with.
Kind of gives bad traffic a little bit of a different definition. So
that's cool. Can I tell you a funny story about JetBlue?
Sure.
I went on a trip last year I went on a mission trip to Ukraine, and we stopped in I think in New York City was one of our layovers, and so we get there, and the JetBlue terminal in New York is really big. It's this huge room, and they directed us over to this like kiosk of computers. There's no one standing there except people that are in line to go to the kiosk. And it tells you like print off your ticket and print off the sticker that goes on your suitcase. And I have never been more nervous about putting a sticker on something in my life. It's like, I don't know how to do that right. Like I wasn't trained in airline school as to how to do this, because I'm used to Delta and other airlines doing it for me. So JetBlue freaked me out a little bit. And then I had to go across the room to the other side and put my suitcase on the correct conveyor belt to get on I'm like, I do not feel trained enough to do this. So that
well, the good thing is that JetBlue, they have a bunch of people standing around trying to help you out and to answer any questions that you might have. And and one thing we also assume for a lot of people that putting a sticker on a bag is typically within most people's skill set. So,
Most people.
but,
I just got nervous. I didn't want to do it wrong, like.
But what it does is, well, it goes through quality checks and stuff before
Okay,
they
good. That's
put it
good
on
to
the
know.
airplane. But when you go into grocery stores, they now have self checkout. When you go to, obviously ATMs and a lot of banks now are using digital tellers, and what it does is it gives you, as the consumer, the ability to kind of interface with something kind of like your iPad that is easy to use, and honestly gives you a little bit more, streamlines the process a little bit, gives you a little more options than what you may be used to in the past. So,
yeah. I mean, it definitely was shorter lines because there's so many places for us to go, so we don't have to wait a really long line to talk to someone.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the goal.
Good.
That way, it gives you and your family more time at home so that you don't have to check in quite as early, or this kind of opens up your day a little bit more by allowing you to show up to the airport maybe just a minute or two later, so you don't have to stand in
I like that.
line of 100 other people.
That's right. I'm not good at being on time, so that's a good thing for me.
Right.
Well, hey, so I want to hear about how you became a pilot, and that, I know that's a cool story. But before we do that, I always want to start with something fun. So, do you have any good, a really good joke for us today, or?
Well, I can tell you, I'm probably one of the worst joke tellers you'll ever hear. See, that was my joke. How was that? Was that a good one?
That was great.
That's the only one I got. All right. So I guess one of my favorite funny airplane jokes will be, what do you call it when a giraffe swallows a toy jet?
What do you call it when a giraffe swallows a toy jet? I don't know.
I bet it sure was a pain in the neck.
I bet it was. I get it. That's a good one.
There's a plane in the neck. Get it?
I get it. I get it. Plane in the neck.
Giraffe.
They have long necks. Yeah, if you have to explain it.
Listen, I fly airplanes. I don't tell jokes. I'm sorry. I apologize.
I'm not talking to a comedian today. That's okay. That's okay. So tell us about being a pilot. I think that's a really cool job that not a lot of people talk about. So how did you end up becoming an airline pilot?
Well, honestly, it started out with a dream, really, and seeing something cool on TV, and something that I saw in the movies, and thinking to myself, oh man, that looks really cool. I kind of joke with a lot of people that I've always wanted to be an airline pilot ever since I was a kid. The problem is I just never grew up. Because a lot of the cool jobs, like right now, my 4-year-old daughter, she wants to be an astronaut, or she wants to be a chef, or something like that. And I would say most adults tend to count those dreams out for small little kids, because we say, haha, you want to be an astronaut. Well, Kylie, my daughter, the funny thing is when she says she wants to be an astronaut, instead of me laughing at her and saying, oh, that's cute, I say, okay, great. I know the perfect school for you to go to so that we can learn how to do that.
Right. Yeah.
And so, and I just kind of take that from my childhood, because my parents were certainly supportive in, me going to school and finding the right flight school to go to and these different things. But it was certainly a dream that was in far left field, especially coming from a family where, my dad grew up in rural North Carolina, and there were farmers, and my dad didn't have any running water and electricity, and which is kind of crazy to think, my dad, this was like back in the 50s and 60s. So this wasn't that long ago. So his son turned into an airline pilot is a pretty big feat for him to say, I guess, that, through his support and my mom's support, that they were able to get me to achieve my dream,
Yeah. I talked to my mom in that first episode about how they never told me no either. Not in a they let me do whatever I want, but if I had dreams or if I thought of something that I felt like I wanted to do, they were always encouraging, even if they, on the inside, they're thinking there's no way they're going to be able to, but they would go, great. Yeah, let's try it. Let's see what happens, And so I thank them for that. Had you been on an airplane when you decided you wanted to be a pilot, or was it just something you'd seen?
We'll be right back after this. You know, raising kids in the digital age isn't easy, but Bark Technology makes products that help parents keep their kids safe online and in real life. They have an app, a phone, and a home device that lets families set parental controls on their internet-connected devices. I love the app because it helps us manage screen time and blocks websites and apps we want our kids to avoid. It also sends alerts and gives us the ability to monitor texts and social media and even track your child's location. Visit bark.us to learn more about how you can keep your kids safe online. Use the code COLLIDEKIDS to get 15% off your subscription of the Bark app.
I would say the first time I was ever on an airplane, my family went on vacation to Las Vegas, which you may think to yourself is not the best family vacation, but but we did. We got on an airplane and we flew to Las Vegas, and it was a good family vacation. I mean, we stayed in the Excalibur Hotel, which is like this big castle. And so,
Cool.
of course, for me being a little kid, that was cool. Um, but most of the time, we got in the car, we drove to the Grand Canyon, we went to the Hoover Dam, we did some really fun family stuff for us. And so,
Wow.
anyway, that was the first time I was ever on an airplane, and of course, I loved it. And then we had friends that moved to Texas from North Carolina, so I would travel down to see them on an airplane over the summer for several weeks in a row, and that was kind of my first exposure to commercial aviation, um, and I just loved it. And I never had anyone in my family. No one in my family was ever a pilot, so
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really have anyone to glean information off of to figure out, well, how do I do this? What do I do?
Yeah.
I do have a cousin. Her husband is or, or was his retired now, but was a Marine Corps pilot. But he wasn't involved in any commercial aviation at all at the
Yeah.
time. So I really didn't know what to do. But what I did was this was back when the internet was just coming out, and everybody who has any age on them remembers the uh, dial-up AOL American Online when you would
Yes.
get the free CD in the mail, and you would
Yes.
try to collect as
Kids
many as you
don't know
could
what
so you could have
CDs
free
are
internet.
either.
No, we had a phone line draped across the entire house to run to a computer that my dad bought at Lowe's Home Improvement, which was funny.
Yes.
Um, and so that's how I would get on the internet, and I would send off for like mailers to, I guess, show me about being a pilot, because I had no idea what to do. I just knew that I could find an airplane on the internet and fill out a form, and they would send me information in the mail. Um, and one interesting thing was I got a mailer one time, and it was this large cockpit poster. It was of what I would assume, it's been so long now, but maybe a 737 cockpit. And of
Okay.
course, at the time, it was just lots of lights and buttons and switches and gauges and dials, and something that looked very difficult to learn, to say the
Yeah,
least.
because you have to know what
Um,
all of those buttons and gauges do, right?
typically they like for you to know what all the buttons do. Yes,
I'd like
yes,
to
they do.
know that. If I'm flying on a plane, I want the pilot to know what all the buttons mean.
Yeah, we do. We do. They
Good.
test us quite often to make sure we know what those buttons do. And if we don't touch the button very often, they actually give us a what's called a quick reference handbook, a QRH, and they those in case there's an emergency or something like that, they can tell us which button to push and switch when, so that you don't have to remember all the fine details
That's
whenever there
good.
could be when there could be an emergency or something major happening that you need to take care of.
Yeah, so there's
But
some accountability to make sure you guys are checking all the buttons. That's good.
that's right, that's right. But my dad brought in this big poster into my room, and he held it up, and he says, "Hey, Jason, you mean to tell me you want to do this?" And he's like holding this poster up in the air, and I just kind of looked at him and chuckled and said, "Well, yeah, I guess." And he goes, "All right." And he threw it on my bed, and he turned around and walked out. And I go, "Well, that was encouraging." And
Thanks, Dad.
but of but of course he didn't mean they really buy it, but it was just a joke. And but in fast forward over years of talking about this, my mom and dad came to me one day and just said, well, hey, look, quit talking about it. Can't you go to the airport and learn how to do it? And this was when I was in high school. And I said, well, yeah, sure. I can figure out, I'll get call a couple schools and figure out a way to take a lesson. And so fast forward, my dad paid for me to go to the airport. I took what's called a discovery flight. At the time, it was like $99, and they would take you up for like a half hour.
Mm-hmm.
And we flew out of RDU, which is the local airport here in Raleigh. And they flew us out over downtown Raleigh, and then flew us right back. And the flight instructor let me steer the airplane one or two times.
Yeah.
And from then on was absolutely hooked. So you
Yeah.
couldn't tear me away from it. And what was funny is in high school, I would leave school early sometimes, and I would go to the airport and take lessons. And that's how I
Wow.
kind of got started. You know, I would leave my weightlifting class at one of my last period teachers, and I'd go to the airport and take flying lessons after school. So that was kind
Wow.
of one of my extracurriculars growing up.
That's cool. So is there like airline pilot college after high school, or what did you do after that?
So the path to becoming an airline pilot is actually there's multiple ways to do it. There's not just one path that you have to take. Obviously, most people seem to think that you have to be in the military. That is a path that you can take, but with the new age of drones and unmanned aircraft, specifically in the military, the number of trained military aviators is probably going down somewhat. I don't have the numbers to back that up, but I would say that that's probably the case. But a lot of people, they go to college. There's tons of universities throughout the country that you can get a degree in something like aeronautics or airport operations. I mean, there's several different career bachelor degree fields that you can pick, where the school will couple your flight training in with your normal classes.
Oh, cool.
And you can get credit that way. Personally, I went to just a flight school. So the only thing that school did was teach people how to fly. It was not an accredited university per se, but it is accredited by like the FAA. So you could imagine
FAA. What is that?
The FAA is the Federal Aviation Administration, and so that is the United States governmental authority over all aviation in the United States.
Interesting.
And so these flight schools are governed by the laws that the FAA passes, and you as a person could go enroll in that school, and you could receive through that school your government licensure to become a pilot. And you can actually be hired as a pilot without the college degree, as long as you fulfill the government requirements to become a pilot. But generally, people do have college degrees, and I would recommend anybody that wanted to do it that you should get a college degree if you want to become a commercial aviation or commercial airline pilot in any regard. Just because it's, obviously the depth of knowledge is deeper. You're able to. It just shows future employers that you're able to start a rigorous program and finish it. And just like any other college degree, it doesn't teach you everything, but what it shows an employer is that you're able to start a program, finish a program, and able to complete it successfully.
Yeah. Do you feel like people that are pilots, is there a certain subject in school they need to be good at? Like, do they need to know a lot of math?
I would say my math skills going through high school were absolutely terrible for algebra. I was not a very good algebra student, meaning like I studied hard and could barely pass.
Me too.
But I did really well in geometry and physics, because my brain just kind of understood angles and degrees, and I don't, maybe because it was less abstract, it was more practical, I guess. And I tend to be wired that way. I like practical knowledge. I feel like I can learn how to do anything as long as somebody's there to show me how to do it, if that kind of
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
But as far as being good in any one subject, I would say that math matters, but you can fly my jet only adding and subtracting all day long. So, which is funny
Okay.
because when you first get started, you do more complicated math, but once you get to a more advanced career in aviation, um, a lot of the performance calculations and things like that are completed by other people. And on a day to day basis, while we need to have a good working knowledge of all this information, and of course, we need to be able to step in if there's a problem with any of the calculations, which is why you should learn it from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But on a day to day basis, we have what's called dispatchers, and they calculate all of our weight and balance, or where our center of gravity is in the airplane, how much weight we can carry. They calculate that themselves, or either through computer programs.
Mm-hmm.
And there's several different types of computer programs that they may use. One of them is called Aero Data. And at JetBlue, we use that computer system to figure out our weight and balance information. But
So is that what the people in the tower are doing?
So no, that's air traffic control people. That's
okay.
completely
So that's not
separate
them.
from.
Okay.
Yeah, our dispatchers at JetBlue are located in New York City, at our headquarters in Long Island City, and it's a big room. If you can imagine, just this huge open room, and there's different sections of that room. It's called System Operations Control, SOC, as we call it. And in that area, they have the dispatchers, which help us with weather, helps us with making sure the airplanes can navigate around the bad weather wherever it may be in the country, helping us calculate as the pilots on the front line, help us calculate how much fuel we need to carry to any given destination, because you may think we just fill the airplane up every single time we go, like you fill up your car.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the crazy thing about fuel is it costs fuel to carry fuel. So
Interesting.
the least amount of fuel we can carry and get you to your destination safely, the better, because it costs the airline less money in fuel by not filling the tanks up every time we go somewhere.
Huh.
And so, which is so those people sit in that SOC. We have another section where it's called crew scheduling, and what those people, they help us, the pilots and the flight attendants, with how many hours you've worked today, how many you worked this week or this month, and making sure that you are still legal to work based off of the time of day, and maybe different scenarios that have gone on during your day or your week, to make sure that you're not working too long.
So you don't
and they
fall
also
asleep,
make sure,
so
we don't fall asleep.
Keep it
That's
safe.
also look down. They want us to know what the buttons do, and they also want to make sure we don't fall asleep. So those are good things.
I like that. I like knowing that.
Yeah, and there's different managers and stuff, and that room is just like buzzing with different types of people to help our operation day to day to get airplanes where they need to be around the country safely. So
wow, it sounds like a team effort. Like there's a lot of different people needed in order to fly one plane, right?
Yes, and that's and absolutely, one of the most important things, specifically, like for me as a captain, is to realize that although I am the captain, I'm only as good as the people that are working up under me. So
right.
The first officer, the in-flight crew members, the flight attendants, the people in the back, making sure that we're all on the same team, and that no matter our backgrounds, where we come from, that we all want to get from point A to point B safely. And if we can get you there on time, that's a great thing. Because my number one goal is to get you there safe, so that you can see your family and friends whenever you get there. So,
yeah.
And so honestly, so I could come home and see my family too. So
right. You have
obviously
family
there's a
too.
little bit of self-righteousness in there, where I'd like to come home and see my wife and kids again
sure.
too. So, and we all work together remotely, from our people in New York City to just locally on the ground to the guys who are putting the bags under the plane and making sure that they put them where they're supposed to be, and that they communicate to us and to the company where those bags are loaded properly, and even down to the gate agents, making sure that they're weighing bags correctly so that we know how much the bags weigh, and making sure that the people are seated appropriately in the airplane, so that our center of gravity is within limits. And there's a lot, so there's lots
Wow.
of moving pieces, and it really takes a team to get an airplane off the ground safely and to get it where it needs to be.
Yeah. You talked about being a captain. That means you're in charge of that plane, right? So do you ever get
Mhm.
nervous about being in charge of flying a plane or being in the sky?
I wouldn't say that I'm nervous at all. Now there are certain scenarios which um, cause you to pause, take a deep breath,
Mm-hmm.
and clearly think about the scenario that you may be in. Um, because I don't think anybody works well when you panic or when you overreact to things.
Hmm.
Um, and kind of alluding back to the team that we just talked about, no one person is ever good enough to get you out of a bad situation. Generally, it takes a team effort, whether or not it be just an actual navigation or piloting type issue that you got to work hand in hand with your first officer to figure out the best way to get through or around weather, or to maybe if the airplane decides it wants to brake, which is rare but can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to really work as a team to be able to get through all those situations to get the airplane where it's got to go safe. So it's certainly a team effort. And I
Mm-hmm.
think as a leader, I like to look at myself as, of course, all the chips may fall on my shoulders, but at the end of the day, as a leader, if I'm only as good as the people below me. So if I'm working well with them, they feel that each person will feel that they can communicate information to me as the captain, so that we can all come out to a mutually agreeable, safe outcome. As the captain, you want to make sure each person on your team has value, and make sure that they understand that they have value, and that no matter if they're loading bags on the bottom or if they're the in-flight crew member passing out a Coke in the back, that everybody has a job to do and it's safety related. And even though you're
Mm.
in-flight crew, they do provide a level of service in the back with drinks and snacks and stuff. That's actually a second part of their job. The most important part of their job is that the customers get where they got to go safely. And if there is an emergency, the in-flight crew in a lot of ways are trained um, more on evacuation techniques and how to get the people off of the airplane, even more so than the pilots are.
Hmm.
Because as a general rule, your pilots are busy flying the plane, getting the plane where it's got to go, and kind of leading the evacuation, where the in-flight crew is the ones actually in the back telling you how to get down the slide if you're having to evacuate. So
Hmm. Yeah.
um, that's all. It's always important to listen to that pre-flight safety briefing instead of
Yes.
sticking your ear pods in your ears and listen to turning up your music. It really
Yeah.
is good information that you should be listening to. So
Yeah. I agree. And we need to be kind to those people because they are our helpers and their job is to keep us safe. So we need to treat, everybody on the plane. And I think that's a good rule
that's
in
right.
general too, is to think about how you treat other people around you, how you treat maybe if you're the leader or you're in charge, treating people with respect is just going to
Hmm.
make the outcome for whatever you're going through a better thing for
Right.
everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I do want to know what's your favorite part of flying? Like, do you really like taking off? Do you really like the landing? Do you really like getting certain altitude in the air? What's your favorite?
I'm going to give you an answer you probably don't want to get, but I enjoy all the parts of the flight equally.
Okay.
I would say probably the most fun part is the landing. Um, that's when you're flying at lower altitudes, getting the airplane lined up with the runway. That's whenever we encounter most of our turbulent weather,
Mm.
bad weather. It
That's when
presents a
I
little
pray
bit
the
more.
most.
Yeah, It presents a little bit of a challenge in some ways, and on some days, I guess, depends on the weather. But and so I enjoy that, the challenge. Um, what's funny is the stronger the wind gets, the more excited I am about the landing, which is probably contrary to what the people in the back are feeling. But
Right. I
um,
remember being
and,
on one flight and the turbulence, like it bounced so much and I was so nervous and I was on the flight by myself. And usually if I'm riding with my husband, I would just like hold his hand, whenever it gets bumpy like that, if I get nervous. Well, I was by myself and I was sitting next to this gentleman who was reading a newspaper the entire time. And I started praying. I was like, Lord, please let this man be understanding if I have to reach out and hold his hand. Like, please let him not freak out if I just grab his arm, because I was so nervous, but I didn't have to, but it was getting to that point.
yeah, yeah. One thing that's funny about that, you being nervous, is that we, as people, we tend to always be nervous about things that we don't fully understand.
Mm,
Um, and in regards to aviation, I could be sitting next to you as an airline pilot, and I could have been in the same situation and not been nervous at all.
yeah.
Uh, when that may be not because I'm better than you, but more so because I understand the situation, what's happening, and
Yeah.
what the pilots are doing in that moment to make sure the airplane is flying safely. Um, and so my nervousness level would be a lot lower than yours.
Sure.
What you may not have known is that the winds were just a little gusty that day, or maybe that turbulence is just kind of like a little pothole in the air that the airplane's flying through. See, we
Yeah.
don't get super nervous when we're driving a car and we hit a pothole, right?
True.
We just think, oh man, there was a pothole. Well, gusty winds and different things like that, that's just the same thing. And the airplanes are very capable of handling those situations, and are engineered to withstand much greater than what you were experiencing in
Yeah.
that moment.
I think that's a great truth to hold on to as well in our spiritual lives too. Like with our
Hmm.
faith, like we get nervous about some things and other people don't get nervous about the same things. Um,
Hmm.
do you have like a favorite verse or something that you kind of hold on to when you're faced with that moment of feeling nervous, or do you pray, or do you think about something about God when you're going through that?
Well, absolutely. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is John 16:33. In the ESV, it says, I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world.
Mm,
Um, and in my life, I tend to get nervous about some things, maybe not always aviation related, but one thing I sometimes have to keep reminding myself is that um, that verse, that take heart, you know, Christ has overcome the world. He, like when he was on the cross and he died for our sins,
mm-hmm.
he said, it is finished. That means it's done. So, you can fight that battle, or whatever scary situation you are in, from a position of victory, and not one from um, being a loser, because Christ has already won. We don't
Yeah,
need to be worried. We don't need to be worried about what tomorrow may hold, because we know who holds tomorrow,
that's
right?
good.
It's Jesus. So, um,
That's good.
mhm,
That's a good one. Take
yeah,
heart. Be courageous,
mhm,
because we know, like you said,
mhm.
we know who holds tomorrow. That's awesome.
That's right. That's right.
Well, this has been really cool. I've learned a lot. I feel like maybe I might be interested in flying a plane now and going to flight. No, I'm probably not going to do
Oh,
that, but that
you
would
should.
be really
I
cool.
I could definitely hook you up. There's a really great place in Atlanta we can send you to school. We just have to talk your
Okay.
husband into it. I know.
Okay. We'll see what
I would
happens.
appreciate that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love that.
Yeah.
So I like to close out the interview with my guests by asking you to tell us about uh, when you were a kid. Like, what was it like? Something you enjoyed to do, or maybe a fun memory from when you were a kid?
So, of course, everything in well, a lot of my life, I've wanted to be a pilot. So, what I have done in the past is I like, whenever I would cut grass, right? And I would sit in my parents' garage on the lawnmower and start pulling the levers and turning the wheel and acting like I was flying an airplane, which is very embarrassing if anyone ever caught me doing that. And also, I had a little R50 Honda motorcycle, and I would go zooming down my neighborhood in this R50 motorcycle.
Whoa.
And my parents would buy me, a brand new pair of shoes or whatever. But I remember the time that I flew on an airplane that whenever they landed on the ground, they would put their thrust reversers out and it would make this big roaring noise,
Yeah.
And so, but one time I stuck my feet out when I was riding my motorcycle and heard a noise that was very similar to that roaring thrust reverser. And I'm like, wow, that sounds like an airplane. So what I would do is I would drive down my neighborhood, and instead of using the brakes on the motorcycle, I would stick my feet out and I would drag my shoes along the asphalt and make this loud noise. And I would bring the motorcycle to a complete stop on the road of the street there in my neighborhood, right across from my house, and act like my airplane was turning off the runway. Now, as a 10-year-old kid, this was an amazing experience. However, when I got home and my mom saw that I completely ruined all my shoes because I was dragging them on the asphalt at 30 miles an hour, the experience turned not so fun pretty quickly.
Right.
So
That's awesome. I think that's a boy thing. I think boys are so hard. I have a son and he's so hard on shoes. He plays hard in those shoes and they always have holes in them. Like, how did you get a hole in your shoe? So there you go.
It's that boy life. So.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you again so much for being on the show. This was so fun. And I enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks for having me so much.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for having me.
I just think that's so funny that all boys seem to be really hard on your shoes. Are you hard on your shoes? Like, do you get holes in your shoes all the time? I really could not tell you of a time in my childhood that I ever got holes in my shoes. Maybe my mom could tell that story. Maybe I should ask her, but I don't remember that. Well, in case you couldn't tell from some of the stories I told today, I get nervous when I'm on an airplane. But this conversation today has really helped me realize how many people are working to make it safe and efficient, and how much training goes into each person who's on the crew and involved in the flight. I had no idea there was that many people. Not just on the plane, but in other buildings and other cities that were checking the flights and checking the weather and checking on the pilot. So I feel a lot better about that, don't you? And what a great conversation about being a good leader. Like Jason was talking about as a captain, how important it is to show others that they have value. And it's always good to treat others with respect. And I love that he reminded us that when we feel nervous, we can remember that verse that he shared, John 16:33, that says, "Take heart." And so when we can face things that we're afraid of, that means the fear doesn't go away, right? It just means in that moment of feeling fear, we can take heart, we can be courageous because we know that God has already won. That was awesome. Well, maybe I'll be a pilot one day. You never know. Maybe I'll try that out next. If podcasting doesn't go anywhere, I'm going to look into that flight school maybe. Well, now it is time for our kids only segment. This part of the show I just love so much. And this is where you get to be on the podcast. So I'm really excited for you to listen to my friend Jacob. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Jacob, and I'm going to be telling you my favorite Bible verse, Romans 3:23. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God.
What a great verse to memorize. Thank you, Jacob. I think that's a good verse to remember that everybody makes mistakes. No one is perfect. No one can do anything perfectly, just God. And that's why we need a savior, right? That's why we need Jesus. And so when When we recognize that we have all sinned and fall short of God's glory, it makes us so much more appreciate what Jesus Christ has done for us. So that's what this is all about. It's all about God's love. I love that. All right. The next person is Jacob's sister, Annabelle. This is super cute. Listen to this.
Hi, my name is Annabelle. Jesus loves us, and it's in our heart.
That was beautiful, Annabelle. Jesus does love us, and he's in our hearts. That's so good. Thank you for sharing that. I'm so glad to have you and Jacob on the show today. Hey, I'd love to hear from you guys as well. I'd love to hear your favorite Bible verse or an encouraging quote or something you like from a book or a movie. Or maybe you have a joke or something else you want to share. Do you have a question for me? Maybe something that you want to know about the show or about some of my guests? I would love to hear from you. So have a grown-up help you go to my podcast website, anchor.fm/CollideKidsPod. And on that page, there's a place for you to leave me a message. You can find all this information on my social media pages as well. I'm on Facebook, the Collide Kids Podcast, or I'm on Instagram at Collide Kids Pod. You can subscribe to this podcast so that new episodes will automatically load each week into whatever podcast app you're using. Wow, I have learned so much today. I hope you've enjoyed the show. As you go through this next week, remember to take heart. God has got this. He's holding on to you. In case no one has told you today, I hope you remember that God loves you so much. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
You don't have to go very far looking for bad news because somehow it just finds you. So finding peace in the chaos can be really difficult, but it doesn't have to be because the River mobile app exists. The River is a Christian music radio station dedicated to playing music to help you get through life's toughest moments or life's happiest moments and everywhere in between. And all from artists who love Jesus and are real people just like you. Listening is easy. You can download it wherever you get apps from. Just search 1049 The River or listen online at riverradio.com. And know that The River is proud to partner with the Collide Kids podcast.